folks, this is Pete. This is the new version of the V-22 Osprey available here at Banana Hobby. This is now coming in the United States Coast Guard color variation, and in this video we're going to actually answer some questions that's been directed towards us in regards to certain setups and a couple of areas of this V-22. So we're going to talk about a couple of setups for the motor pods, what to look for during initialization, and what to do and what not to do, and certain things that are a question towards us for the EPAs or travel adjust. So first of all, this is the Coast Guard version of the V-22. Just a beautiful looking airplane in the air. Again, you have full vertical takeoff capabilities, transitioning into forward flight. Flight character is great. You don't have to fly full throttle the whole time. We're still flying on 4-cell, 2200 to 3300 size 4-cell lithium polymer batteries. And let's go ahead and jump right into this without getting this way too long. So first of all, we're going to talk about the power on process. I'm using my 9503 DSM-X. You could be flying on your Spectrum radios, on your JRs, on your Futabas, whatever radio you're choosing. I know that I've heard several of you are flying on the Gropner radios or the Jetty radios. Those are just fine as well. First of all, this is going to be flying like a multi-rotor, so you're not using a multi-rotor flying mode on your radio. The best thing to select on your radio is just regular fixed wing, because the flight controller is configured for that, and everything is self-explanatory as far as you're plugging them in. So let's go ahead and plug this V-22 in here. And keep in mind, we are going to plug this in and leave this on a flat surface. This needs to initialize on an extremely flat surface. This grass here is pretty flat, so we're going to go ahead and power on, transmitters on. There we go. So our battery is connected. We're going to wait for the motor pods to actually swing up. And something to look for right here that's very important is there is a little blue LED that's on the flight controller board, which I'll show you right here. And if this blue LED is actually blinking, you're going to want to power everything back off and then repower back on again with the blue LED is solid. When the blue LED is solid, it is ready for flight. The V-22 is ready to fly. So I want to address something that's occurring with my V-22 right now. When you first plug it in, for some reason or another, the ailerons will deflect. And you'll see that the flight controller is actually, it's working, but the ailerons actually deflect. So what I've done is I'll let this initialize for a good period of time, and then I'll also rotate the motor pods to the forward flight position, and then the ailerons will flatten out. And sometimes, depending on how the ailerons are initializing, you know what, I'm going to actually go and take a look here. Okay, so I do have a solid LED, and we're going to go ahead and rotate back to up, and sometimes the ailerons will start moving back down again, and all that is the flight controller sensing that there's movement in the motor pods. So once we're there, I want to talk about, but it's always good to cycle that, and actually that will zero out most of the time. You definitely want to set your endpoint adjustments or your EPAs or your travel adjust on your radios to as high as they can go. On my radio, I'm setting them to 150 for my elevator channel, and 150 up-down elevator channel, and 150 on my aileron channel. And what that does is it gives you all the maximum forward and back pitch while you are still in the hover flight mode. So this way you're already achieving forward flight in the hover mode, and it's basically flying like a helicopter. And then you also have your yaw, which is going to be on your rudder stick. And then the other part that I want to address is, can you use sub-trim? On this particular model, by all means, you definitely can use sub-trim. So to achieve perfect vertical platform on these motor pods, you're going to want to adjust sub-trim channel for your elevator so that the pods are actually in an up and even position. When you're in hover mode, it's not pitching forward and not pitching back. Although the flight controller should help reduce some of that. But if your motor pod pitch is way off on the sub-trim, go ahead and sub-trim them out so that they're kind of neutral. Take off, come back down, and adjust the sub-trim again. and from there you can adjust the push rod for your elevator. So with that, let's go ahead and we're going to do a little bit of a hover flight here, right in this general area with the V-22, and we have full pitch on the pods here, and that's only on my elevator channel, and we are still in hover mode. So upon takeoff here, you're going to want to make sure you take off and right away give it some flight altitude. The flight controller does tend to be sensitive if there's a lot of turbulence coming from the wind rotor activity coming from the propellers. So you can see right here, I am completely flying right now in hover mode, and we are relying all on the elevator stick flying the V-22 here. You can definitely increase the rudder EPAs or travel adjust to have it more sensitive on the yaw, but that's personal flying preference. So right here, we're pretty good with hover. We have a little bit of a headwind, and this V-22 will always like to hover better into a headwind. During tailwind, it sometimes will react a little bit weird, so you want to be sure that you're always flying into a headwind. I'm going to go ahead and power up a little bit, and you can see right here that the V-22 pretty much is flying and hovering on its own here. Just trying to show the radio there, but I'm not sure if it actually showed. So let's go ahead and just go ahead and fly this around. And we're going to keep in mind that we want to keep some altitude. Altitude is always your best friend when you're transitioning, and I've seen quite a few that have actually set the motor pod tilt on a manual switch so you can actually adjust the entire position of the motor pod, which you can do as well. So I'm going to go stand next to this V-22 so you can see the stability of the aircraft when you're hands off on the radio. So this is hands off on the radio. We got a little bit of an up throttle going there, but that's pretty stable there. Okay, so this is what we were talking about. Sometimes the flight controller will sense wind variations, and she will tend to do like that little bit of an altitude bobble. That is okay. Again, if you keep your finger on the throttle, and you can hear the fan working in the back, and you are on the throttle, you can correct that quickly by descending or actually reducing throttle or increasing throttle. So we definitely are flying in some headwind here, and you can see this is still in hover mode, and believe it or not, in the hover mode, she is quite responsive and flies extremely well. It flies basically like a helicopter or a multi-rotor. So we'll bring it back in here. We'll come down in this really nice patch of green grass. And that was flown completely in hover mode. And then now we're going to go ahead and talk about the transition into forward flight mode. And again, I'm on just one single switch, and it's going down into fixed wing mode, which gives it up elevator value, and then the flight controller is still engaged, so that 3-axis is still controlling everything to keep the flight nice and smooth. Again, definitely transition with this with some altitude until you get the feeling of how it actually transitions, and then you can do it lower and then more advanced transitioning. So let's go ahead and go back into hover. Always transition into a headwind. So we are now in forward flight, and I'm only at about half throttle. There's no need to go to full throttle at all. However, if you do go to full throttle, she's pretty fast. And you can give it a couple of clicks of trim if you need it. That's always okay. Slow flyby right there. You can see how stable she is. Look at that. Again, definitely always transition into forward flight with the headwind. Don't do it with the tailwind. Then we're going to set up for one more slow flyby, and then we're going to go ahead and transition back into hover mode here. Look at that, low and slow on the V-22 Coast Guard. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go into upwind, and we're going to go ahead and flip transition right back into hover mode. Thank you for joining me for this instructional video for the V-22 Osprey and the color. Just looks great in the air. Again, you can still remove the landing gears, and it looks like it has retracts in it. And I think people have actually already put retract systems in this. With that, if you have any questions in regards to programming or anything with this V-22 or any questions at all, go ahead and post them in the comment box below, and we'll definitely try to answer your questions the best we can. We follow on all the social networks here at Banana Hobby, as well as RC groups and the other forums. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the comment box below that we haven't covered today. Aside from that, have fun with it, get some altitude, and altitude is your best friend sometimes until you get the feeling of how these actually fly. My name is Pete. Thank you for checking out this video, and we will see you next time.